At your local theme park, chances are that some of the coasters there used to operate somewhere else. It's also true that some of your favorite coasters from the past have moved on to other parks. In a previous video, I looked at the Six Flags ride rotation program and how Six Flags used to specifically build rides to move them around every few years. And nowadays, they aren't strangers to relocating rides where they see fit. Today, I want to look at 12 coasters within the Six Flags and Cedar Fair chains that should be relocated, and which parks within those chains they should go to. Number 12. Speedy Gonzales Hot Rod Racers at Six Flags Magic Mountain. Magic Mountain has not one, not two, not three, but 4 coasters for kids. Magic Flyer is as small as it gets, and Roadrunner Express is more of a family coaster. But Magic Mountain has 2 coasters in the middle where they probably only need one. Canyon Blaster is an E&F miler that has a 21-year track record at the park, and at one point was the only kiddie coaster at the park. Speedy Gonzales is the latest one to be added back in 2014, and it isn't really necessary. Now consider Six Flags Over Georgia and Six Flags St. Louis, which don't have a single coaster for kids. Six Flags Over Georgia does have the Joker Funhouse coaster, and that's a family coaster somewhat on the level of Magic Mountain's Roadrunner Express. So I'm gonna give Speedy Gonzales to Six Flags St. Louis. They have the River King Mine Train and Pandemonium, which are family-style coasters, but are in no way kiddie coasters. Let's give the poor kids of St. Louis something that they can make their first credit at a young age. Number 11. Pandemonium at Six Flags Fiesta, Texas. This Gerstlauer spinning coaster is a good fit for the park, but the park doesn't have a whole lot of land to work with, and it's an up-and-coming park in the Six Flags chain. It's kind of Six Flags testing ground, as it was the first park to open an SNS free spin and an RMC Raptor. Plus, it was among the first to get an RMC hybrid conversion, the first one with an inversion. The Pandemonium clone is a nice family coaster to have, but if the park wants to add something new and innovative, like an access coaster or something like that, this plot of land would be a nice spot for it. Fiesta Texas does have an intermediate family coaster in Roadrunner Express, so they can spare this one. A park that doesn't have a modern intermediate family coaster is Six Flags Over Georgia. It jumps from Joker Funhouse Coaster, which is a borderline family kiddie coaster, to the Mine Train that dates back to 1967, and then from there you have nothing but extreme models. Pandemonium would be a great fit for Over Georgia as kids work their way up the ladder to Mindbender or Great American Scream Machine. Number 10. Coast Rider at Knott's Berry Farm. Knott's walks the line between a thrill park and a family park, offering plenty of attractions for both. But with Jaguar, Sierra Sidewinder, and Pony Express, there are plenty of intermediate family-style coasters. The addition of Coast Rider in 2013 was pretty unnecessary. But what park could benefit from a Wild Mouse? How about the park up the California coast? Not Great America, but Gilroy Gardens. This is definitely a family park. They have a Morgan Mine Train and a Zero Tivoli, which were added back in 2001. I think they could benefit from a Wild Mouse to add to their collection if they can find a place for it. And it would be more useful here than it is at Knott's. Number 9. Goliath at Six Flags Great America. This one comes with a huge stipulation, and that is if Great America decides to turn American Eagle into a hybrid. It seems like something is going to have to happen with American Eagle soon. Will Six Flags continue to operate it as is? If so, they'll probably need new PTC trains. Will they want to invest in those when it won't make the ride any more popular than it already is? Or will they opt to make a larger but much more beneficial investment to give it the RMC treatment? A lot of people think they're going to go the RMC route, and they insist it can be different than the park's current RMC, Goliath, so it's not redundant. I believe that this is true, but I also believe that if the park makes RMC American Eagle that much different, then it'll be significantly better than Goliath, basically making it obsolete in its own park. Goliath has a small, rectangular footprint and was clearly made to be cloned. The Six Flags Dubai artwork showed what looked to be like a Goliath clone. It seems like this could be picked up and plopped anywhere. So where would I plop it? I would send it to upstate New York to the Great Escape. This park could use a great standout coaster, and they currently have just one wooden coaster, Comet, and people love this thing. It would not be a good candidate for the RMC treatment. So Goliath would not be upstaged at this park by an RMC conversion. With RMC American Eagle, Goliath makes a lot more sense at Great Escape than it does at Great America. Number 8. Vertical Velocity at Six Flags Great America. Sorry to everyone in Chicagoland, I'm taking another one of your coasters. V2, V squared, however you say it, is one of those coasters that just kinda seems to have outlasted its worth at the park. The Intamin Impulse was a cool gimmick back in 2000 to 2002, but it died off pretty quick, and a ride like this may make more sense at a smaller park, especially with the addition of Max Force that has the fastest acceleration in the country. V2 seems mild by comparison. It was also the only launch coaster in the park for 18 years, but now it's second fiddle to Max Force. So where can we send Vertical Velocity where it'll be a better fit? How about a mid-sized park without a launch coaster? How about Six Flags New England? It's a small footprint, you can put it almost anywhere, and that fills the launch coaster gap. If not Six Flags New England, how about Frontier City? They have the Aero Shuttle Loop with Diamondback, but I think an Impulse would be good here, especially considering how tiny the park is. It packs enough thrill into a narrow space. Number 7. Wicked Twister at Cedar Point. Just about everything I said about Vertical Velocity applies here also. It was added at the tail end of the Impulse craze as the tallest, fastest, and twistiest. Cedar Point's next two coasters after Wicked Twister were Top Thrill Dragster and Maverick, which are spectacular launch coasters. This is one of the least popular rides at the park, and the park really doesn't need it anymore after 18 seasons. I know the rumor that this would be going to California's Great America, since the 20-year plan that the park submitted to the city talked about adding an impulse coaster. This does make a lot of sense here since the park doesn't have a launch coaster, but it seems to me that Cedar Fair has bigger and better plans for this park's future. I think this would be much better off at Worlds of Fun, a park that's also missing a launch coaster, and a park that's gone over a decade without a new coaster. Worlds of Fun has tons of space, and this wouldn't take up much. It would be a big hit at the park, so Cedar Fair should make the move. Number 6. Vortex at Carowinds. This was one of the original B&Ms, and it's pretty outdated. Not only is it small, it's a stand-up. Carowinds has become one of Cedar Fair's favorite parks, and are adding big and innovative rides. Vortex is a blast from the Paramount past. Carowinds is best off getting this off their ledger to make room for something better in the future as Cedar Fair continues to make this a destination park. So where should they ship this old B&M? My pick is Michigan's Adventure. This would be their first B&M coaster, and Cedar Fair can sweeten the pot by relocating it as a floorless coaster, getting rid of the stand-up trains to make it a more pleasant experience. This would be Michigan's Adventure's first new coaster in a dozen years, and that was Geauga Lake's Vekoma SLC, Thunderhawk. Michigan's Adventure is used to abuse and neglect, so relocating Vortex here would fit in with that pattern and satisfy the park's need for a new coaster for another dozen plus years. Number 5. Nighthawk at Carowinds. I know it seems like I'm taking a lot of coasters from these big parks, but ultimately it's a good thing. Cedar Fair and Six Flags have their favorite parks, and they're always getting better, meaning some of the stuff that may have been new and innovative 20 years ago needs to get going and move out of the park. Like Vortex, Nighthawk was a throwback to the Paramount days pre-2007. This coaster is probably on its last leg anyway, with the parts being harder to come by, and Firehawk at Kings Island already being scrapped, so it's not really a long-term viable coaster for another park. But for the sake of argument, let's pretend that it is. I would move Nighthawk out of this spot and replace it with a B&M Flyer, something that would be popular and draw long lines, not just because it has horrible capacity. So where would this aging coaster end up? Let's give it to Valley Fair. It would be the only flying coaster around. It's still a pretty thrilling coaster for the park that hasn't gotten anything new in 13 years. Other than the fact that this thing is close to its expiration date, I think this move makes a lot of sense. Get it away from the destination park and move it to the regional park that's hungry for something to get excited about. Number 4. Time Warp at Canada's Wonderland. This Samperla Volaire doesn't really belong in a park as huge as Canada's Wonderland. This seems like something that a boardwalk or a county fair should have. Let's get this piece of trash out of Canada's largest amusement park and get it somewhere where it'll be appreciated for what it is, if that's possible. Any of the bottom tier Cedar Fair parks could use this without being redundant, since none of them have a flying coaster. The only one I haven't mentioned today is Dorney Park. They do have that plot of land that Stinger took up that's now vacant, and that could easily fit the compact rectangle layout of Time Warp. You could probably even fit 2 of these in that spot. Dorney is another park that currently doesn't have an operating coaster that opened in the last dozen years, and they've gotten nothing but hand-me-downs since 2005. So why not go the same route for their next coaster and enjoy the headbanging fun that is Time Warp? Number 3. Goliath at Six Flags New England. This Vekoma giant inverted boomerang makes no sense at this park. They already had a boomerang, and they put this one right next to their other one. Six Flags moved this out of Magic Mountain after the 2011 season, and of all the parks to give it to, I would have never guessed Six Flags New England. It's been a disaster for the park since its arrival in 2012, and I'm sure its time at the park is limited. So why not move it to a park that should have gotten it in the first place? Six Flags America. They did have an inverted boomerang called Two-Face that operated from 1999 to 2007. It's been long enough since its removal to put a similar but upgraded version into this park. With the right trains, this could really be a lot of fun. Its capacity isn't great, but with Six Flags America's attendance, that wouldn't be much of an issue. Although, given the maintenance issues that these models have, and the maintenance issues that Six Flags America has, it would be interesting to see how often this coaster would actually be open to the public. Number 2. Rougarou at Cedar Point. This B&M floorless coaster started its life as a stand-up coaster back in 1996, and it was called Mantis. In 2015, it was converted into a floorless coaster, which can basically be described as putting lipstick on a pig. That may be a little harsh because Rougarou isn't that bad. Some people enjoy it and a lot of other people hate it. Just like Six Flags Great America and Carowinds, I think it's time for Cedar Point to move out some of the outdated coasters, and I think that a B&M stand-up layout from the mid-90s doesn't really fly with Cedar Point's modern standards. Rougarou takes up a pretty big plot of land that could be used for something better, and there are plenty of other parks in the chain that could use a coaster just like this. Knott's Berry Farm comes to mind, but I don't think they have the space. Coast Rider's plot is nowhere near big enough for Rougarou, so I would send this to a park with plenty of wide open spaces. Worlds of fun. Their only other B&M is Patriot, an inverted coaster, and ever since Orient Express closed in 2003, they haven't had a good sit-down looper unless you count their boomerang. Rougarou would be a hit at Worlds of Fun, instead of being that coaster that's just too easy to walk by on your way to Millennium Force. Number 1. Scream at Six Flags Magic Mountain. This was a B&M floorless added at the end of the B&M floorless craze at the beginning of the 21st century. Six Flags had already added 5 to the chain by 2003. Great Adventure, Marine World, Fiesta Texas, Worlds of Adventure, and New England. Magic Mountain would carve out a piece of the parking lot and plop down a mirrored clone of Medusa at Great Adventure, now known as Bizarro. Its location in the park is pretty bad. Well off the main pathway, only accessible to people walking down to Colossus and willing to keep venturing all the way down to the end of a pathway that ends with Scream's entrance. Before Colossus got twisted in 2015, there weren't a whole lot of people headed down this way anyway, so Scream was basically that forgotten coaster tucked away in the furthest corner of the park. Even today, it's rare for Scream to have a line unless it's running with one train and it's running at minimum capacity. With all the other great coasters in the park, including the B&M multi-looping stand-up Riddler's Revenge, I don't think that Scream would be missed if it were to pack up and move on to another park. The two that immediately come to mind to adopt Scream are Over Texas and St. Louis. I already granted Magic Mountain's Speedy Gonzales coaster to St. Louis, so I'll send Scream to Over Texas. This is a middle-tier Six Flags park, and it surprisingly just has one B&M, which is their Batman clone, and this represents the coaster with the most inversions in the park with 5. The closest thing they have to Scream is Shockwave, which is a looping Schwarzkopf, and they are very different. Over Texas could easily carve out a piece of their parking lot over by Titan and plop this in there, make it even more impossible to find than Titan is, and even more so than Scream is at its current park. Once this is done, Riddler's Revenge can get rid of its stand-up trains and receive brand new floorless trains. This would instantly make that ride so much better. This move gives Over Texas something they need, allows Magic Mountain to get rid of something they don't need, and enables Riddler's Revenge to get the upgrade that it needs. It's a win all the way around. So let me know what you think about this list, and what other coasters in the Six Flags and Cedar Fair chains that you would relocate, and why they would be a good fit at their new parks. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.